The first warning came as a whisper through the quantum communication arrays. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth's blue marble turn slowly in the void when the alert tone pierced the silence. The message was brief, clinical in its simplicity. Unknown vessels detected its system perimeter. Trajectory: Earth. Intent: unknown. Sarah had been expecting this day for years. Humanity had been reaching for the stars for decades, sending exploration vessels deeper into space, establishing colonies on distant worlds. They had found ruins, ancient artifacts, and evidence of long-dead civilizations. But they had never encountered living alien intelligence. Until now, the Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and malice. 12 massive warships, each the size of a small city, their hulls gleaming with an alien alloy that seemed to drink in starlight. They moved with purpose, their formations precise and deadly. The lead ship broadcast a message across all frequencies, in perfect English. Humans of the Sol System. The voice was melodic, almost musical, but carried undertones of absolute authority. I am Fleet Commander Thexal of the Zephyrian Dominion. You have expanded beyond your permitted boundaries. Your species has been marked for subjugation. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will ensure your suffering echoes across the galaxy. On the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Defiant, Admiral Marcus Stone felt his blood run cold. The translation systems had picked up the alien language beneath the English words. The message had been broadcast simultaneously in Zephyrian, and the computer analysis was chilling. These beings spoke of humans the way humans might discuss an ant colony that had grown too large. The Zephyrians didn't wait for a response. Their weapons spoke first. The attack began with a demonstration of power that sent shockwaves through human space. The mining station on Ceres simply vanished, consumed by a weapon that turned matter into energy with terrifying efficiency. The message was clear. This was what awaited Earth if humanity chose to resist. But humanity had never been good at accepting defeat. Admiral Stone's response was swift and decisive. Every available ship in the Earth Defense Force was called to action. The orbital defense platforms around Earth hummed to life, their massive railguns and particle beam arrays tracking the incoming threat. The colonial militias received urgent messages. Hold your positions, protect civilian populations, and prepare for the worst. The first engagement took place near Jupiter. Captain Diana Vasquez led a squadron of 20 human fighters against a single Zephyrian scout ship. The alien vessel was 3 times the size of her entire squadron combined. But the humans had one advantage. They weren't afraid to die. The battle was brutal and one-sided. Zephyrian energy weapons carved through human ships like paper, while human kinetic rounds seemed to barely scratch their opponent's armor. Captain Vasquez watched 12 of her pilots die in the first 30 seconds of combat. But in their deaths, they learned something valuable. The Zephyrian shields had a weakness. They were designed to deflect energy weapons, but were less effective against physical projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Vasquez transmitted her findings even as her own ship came apart around her. Her last act was to ram her fighter into the scout ship's weapon array, creating a cascade failure that destroyed both vessels. Her sacrifice provided crucial intelligence that would shape the battles to come. The Zephyrians were puzzled by human resistance. In their long history of conquest, most species either surrendered immediately or fought with calculated self-preservation. Humans did neither. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, throwing themselves against impossible odds without hesitation. Commander Thexal studied the tactical reports with growing frustration. His fleet had expected to complete the subjugation of Earth within days. Instead, they had been fighting for weeks, and, while they were winning, the cost was higher than anticipated. Human ships were crewed by Zephyrian standards, but they were crewed by beings who seemed to view death in battle as a form of honor rather than failure. The siege of Earth began on a Tuesday. The Zephyrian fleet took position beyond the orbit of Mars, just outside the range of Earth's most powerful weapons. They began a systematic bombardment of human military installations, carefully avoiding civilian populations. They wanted humanity broken, not extinct. Slaves were more valuable than corpses. But the humans had been preparing for this scenario for generations. Deep beneath the surface of every major world, hardened bunkers housed the remnants of human government and military command. On Earth, the Global Defense Network activated protocols that had been theoretical until this moment. President Elena Rodriguez addressed humanity from a bunker deep beneath the Canadian Rockies. Her words were broadcast across the solar system, carried by quantum entanglement communicators that the Zephyrians couldn't intercept or jam. Citizens of humanity, she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. We face an enemy that considers us inferior, beings to be enslaved or destroyed at their whim. They believe that because they have superior technology, they have the right to determine our fate. They are wrong. She paused, looking directly into the camera, her eyes reflecting the steel that had carried humanity to the stars. We have faced extinction before. We have stood against empires that seemed invincible. We have endured ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have ended our species. Yet here we are, children of Earth, scattered across the stars. We endure. We adapt. We fight. The president's words sparked something deep in the human psyche. Across the solar system, civilian populations began organizing resistance cells. Engineers worked around the clock to modify mining equipment into weapons. Farmers turned their agricultural ships into supply runners for the military. Children too young to fight served as messengers and spotters. On Mars, Governor Chun Lu faced an impossible choice. The Zephyrians had demanded the surrender of all human colonies, promising lenient treatment for those who complied immediately. The Red Planet's defenses were minimal compared to Earth's, and the 2 million civilians under his protection looked to him for guidance. His response came in the form of action rather than words. Mars had been terraformed using massive atmospheric processors, machines capable of converting the planet's thin atmosphere into something humans could breathe. Under Lu's orders, those same machines were converted into the largest improvised weapons in human history. When the Zephyrian subjugation fleet arrived at Mars, they found the planet's atmosphere on fire. Literally, Lu had released every volatile compound in the terraforming system and ignited it, creating a planetary-scale explosion that destroyed 3 alien ships and damaged 2 others. The cost was terrible. Mars would be uninhabitable for decades. But the message was clear. Humans would rather destroy their own worlds than see them fall to alien rule. The Zephyrians began to realize they had underestimated their opponents. Fleet Commander Thexal had conquered 17 species in his career, and none had shown such determination to resist. Most civilizations fought to preserve their lives and their culture. Humans seemed to fight for the sake of fighting itself. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, xenobiologist and head of the Emergency Science Council, studied intercepted Zephyrian communications from her laboratory on Luna. The aliens' language was complex, but their tactical discussions revealed a concerning pattern. They spoke of humans not as a strategic threat, but as an anomaly, something that didn't fit their understanding of how intelligence was supposed to work. They keep referring to us as the Broken Ones, Morrison explained to Admiral Stone during an encrypted conference call. Their translation protocols can't properly convey the concept, but they seem to think there's something fundamentally wrong with human psychology. They can't understand why we're willing to die for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. Admiral Stone processed this information grimly. Can we use this against them? Possibly, Morrison replied. If they truly don't understand human psychology, they can't predict our actions. That might give us the edge we need. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant James Harrison was a communications specialist stationed on one of Earth's orbital defense platforms when he noticed something odd about Zephyrian fleet movements. The aliens followed precise patterns, their ships moving in formations that were mathematically perfect but strategically rigid. Harrison spent 3 days analyzing the patterns before he realized what he was seeing. The Zephyrians weren't just organized, they were controlled. Their entire fleet operated as a single entity, with individual ships acting as organs of a larger body. There was no room for initiative, no capacity for improvisation. He transmitted his findings to Earth Command with a simple recommendation: chaos. The strategy that emerged was unlike anything in military history. Instead of trying to match the Zephyrians' superior firepower, humanity would overwhelm them with unpredictability. Every human ship would operate independently, following no set patterns or formations. Civilian vessels would be armed and sent against military targets. Mining ships would ram warships. Even escape pods would be equipped with explosives. The first test of this strategy came during the Battle of Europa. A Zephyrian battle group had moved to capture Jupiter's moon, seeking to establish a forward base. They encountered what appeared to be a ragtag fleet of human vessels, cargo haulers, research ships, even a luxury liner that had been pressed into military service. The Zephyrians engaged with their usual precision, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that made no sense. Human ships ignored basic tactical doctrine, attacking from impossible angles and retreating when victory seemed certain. The cargo haulers released their loads directly into alien formations, filling space with debris that interfered with targeting systems. The research ships used their laboratory equipment as weapons, creating localized gravitational anomalies that pulled Zephyrian vessels off course. Most shocking of all was the luxury liner Stellar Princess. Captain Jennifer Walsh had evacuated her civilian passengers days earlier and filled her ship with volunteers from across the solar system. When the Zephyrian flagship focused its main guns on the liner, expecting to destroy it easily, Walsh did something no alien commander would ever consider. She surrendered. The Zephyrian commander, following standard protocols, prepared to accept the surrender and board the vessel. The Stellar Princess transmitted its unconditional capitulation and requested permission to approach the flagship for the formal ceremony. Captain Walsh guided her ship alongside the massive alien vessel, matching its speed and trajectory. She activated the ship's intercom one final time. "This is Captain Jennifer Walsh of the Earth vessel Stellar Princess. It has been my honor to serve with you all. Remember us." The liner's fusion reactor had been rigged to overload. The explosion that followed destroyed the Zephyrian flagship and damaged 3 nearby vessels. More importantly, it demonstrated something that shook the alien fleet to its core. Humans would use surrender itself as a weapon. In the aftermath of the Battle of Europa, Zephyrian communications traffic spiked dramatically. Dr. Morrison's translation teams worked around the clock to decode the intercepted messages, and what they found was remarkable. The aliens were afraid, not of human weapons or technology, but of human unpredictability itself. The Zephyrian military operated on the principle of perfect information leading to perfect tactics. They could not comprehend an enemy that deliberately chose inferior tactical positions, that used surrender as an attack, that seemed to prefer death over defeat. Commander Thexal found himself in an unprecedented situation. His fleet was still winning by any conventional measure, but the cost was escalating with each engagement. Worse, his subordinates were beginning to question orders, something that had never happened in Zephyrian military history. The humans' chaotic tactics were introducing an element of uncertainty that the rigid Zephyrian command structure couldn't handle. The breaking point came during the assault on Luna. The moon's defense systems were formidable but conventional, and the Zephyrian fleet approached with confidence. They had learned to expect human trickery and had adapted their tactics accordingly. What they didn't expect was for the moon itself to fight back. Chief Engineer Roberto Santos had spent the weeks since the invasion began preparing Luna's most devastating surprise. The moon's mass driver, originally built to launch mining equipment to Earth, had been converted into the largest weapon in the solar system. Instead of small payloads, it now fired massive tungsten rods at a significant fraction of light speed. The first volley caught the Zephyrian fleet completely off guard. 3 ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic energy weapons that had no technological equivalent in alien arsenals. The second volley scattered the remaining ships, forcing them to break formation for the first time since the invasion began. But Santos had saved the best for last. Luna's mining operations had hollowed out vast chambers in the moon's interior. Those chambers were now filled with the most volatile substances human science could create. As the scattered Zephyrian ships regrouped for a final assault on the moon's surface, Santos triggered a chain reaction that split Luna in half. The explosion was visible from Earth with the naked eye. Chunks of the moon, some the size of mountains, hurtled through space in all directions. The Zephyrian fleet found itself trapped in a debris field of unimaginable proportions, their perfect formations useless against an enemy that had weaponized a celestial body. Commander Thexal watched his fleet take catastrophic damage and made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. For the first time in Zephyrian military history, he ordered a retreat. The human defenders watched in stunned silence as the alien ships broke off their attack and began to withdraw. They had expected to die fighting, had prepared for the complete destruction of their world. Instead, they had driven off an enemy that possessed technology centuries ahead of their own. But the victory was costly. Luna was gone, its destruction visible as a ring of debris around Earth. Millions had died in the fighting, and entire worlds lay in ruins. Yet humanity had proven something that would echo across the galaxy. They could not be conquered by force alone. As the Zephyrian fleet limped away from the Sol system, carrying word of human resistance to the stars, Admiral Stone stood once again on the observation deck of what remained of Luna Station. The view had changed dramatically. Where Earth's moon had once hung in the void, there was now only scattered rubble and the lingering glow of cooling debris. But Earth itself still turned its ancient orbit blue and beautiful and free. The price of that freedom had been terrible, but it had been paid willingly by a species that refused to kneel to any master. The invasion was over, but the war had just begun. Across human space, the survivors began to rebuild, to adapt, and to prepare. They had learned that they were not alone in the universe, and that not all neighbors came in peace. But they had also learned something about themselves. When pushed to the brink of extinction, humanity didn't break. It evolved. The Zephyrian retreat from Sol system sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. In the crystal spires of the Dominion capital world of Zeph Prime, Fleet Commander Thexal faced a tribunal that had never before heard the word defeat spoken in their sacred chambers. High Arbiter Vexron, a being whose crystalline form had witnessed 3 millennia of Zephyrian expansion, studied the tactical reports with disbelief. You retreated from a primitive species that has barely mastered interplanetary travel. Explain this impossibility. Thexal's confidence, once unshakable, had been replaced by something his species rarely experienced: uncertainty. The humans do not follow logical patterns of warfare. They sacrifice strategic advantages for psychological effects. They destroy their own territories rather than see them occupied. They use surrender as a weapon and treat death as victory. The tribunal exchanged harmonized tones of confusion. In Zephyrian society, every action served a calculable purpose. War was mathematics. Victory was the inevitable result of superior numbers and technology. The concept of fighting without hope of survival was not merely alien to them. It was incomprehensible. Perhaps, suggested Arbiter Kethlon, her voice like singing crystal, the humans are simply defective. Their neural patterns may be corrupted by some form of collective madness. But Thexal had seen too much to accept such simple explanations. Defective beings do not innovate weapons for mining equipment. They do not coordinate complex strategies while maintaining tactical independence. The humans possess a form of intelligence that our models cannot predict. The tribunal's final decision reflected their growing concern. The Zephyrian Dominion had conquered 73 worlds in the past millennium, each victory swift and absolute. The human resistance represented an unprecedented challenge to their understanding of warfare itself. They would not make the same mistake twice. The Second Fleet, commanded by Fleet Admiral Zorthak, represented the largest military force ever assembled by the Zephyrian Dominion. 150 warships, each equipped with the most advanced weapons their civilization could produce. Bioweapons designed to target human physiology specifically. Nanite swarms capable of dismantling matter at the molecular level. Gravitational weapons that could crush planets. But, more importantly, the Second Fleet carried something new: psychological warfare specialists. The Zephyrians had studied every piece of human communication intercepted during the first invasion. They had analyzed human literature, art, and historical records. They believed they had found humanity's weakness: their emotional attachments. On Earth, the 3 years since the first invasion had transformed human civilization. The global defense network had been rebuilt and expanded, incorporating lessons learned from a Zephyrian attack. But the greatest changes were not technological. Colonel Sarah Chun, promoted after her heroic actions during the Luna Station evacuation, now commanded the newly formed Human Special Forces Division. Her Marines were volunteers from across the solar system, men and women who had lost everything in the first invasion and sought only the chance to make the aliens pay. "We know they're coming back," Chun addressed her troops in the underground complex that had replaced Luna Station. "Intelligence suggests a force 10 times larger than the first invasion. They've studied us, adapted their tactics, learned from their mistakes. But they've made one critical error in their calculations. She paused, looking at faces hardened by loss and shaped by determination. These were not professional soldiers in the traditional sense. They were farmers and engineers, teachers and artists, bound together by shared understanding that some things were worth dying for. They assume that because they understand our psychology, they can predict our behavior. They're wrong. Understanding what drives a human to fight and being able to stop them are entirely different things. The Zephyrian Second Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with a precision that spoke of careful planning. Unlike the first invasion, they did not announce their presence with ultimatums or demonstrations of power. They simply began their advance, a wall of alien ships moving inexorably toward Earth. Admiral Marcus Stone, now bearing the scars of 3 years of desperate preparation, watched the enemy approach from his command ship Retribution. The vessel was a hybrid of human engineering and recovered Zephyrian technology, powerful enough to face alien ships on something approaching equal terms. But it was only one ship against an armada. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Davis, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. It's different from last time." The message that came through was not the imperious demand for surrender that had preceded the first invasion. Instead, it was a carefully crafted psychological weapon. "Humans of Earth." The voice was unmistakably human, speaking with the accent of someone from the American Midwest. "My name is David Mueller. I was captured during the mining station raid 3 years ago. I'm speaking to you now because the Zephyrians have shown me the futility of continued resistance." Admiral Stone felt his blood turn cold. The voice was genuine, the words spoken by a human throat. But the message was pure Zephyrian psychology. "They've treated me well," the voice continued. "I've seen their worlds, their civilization. They don't want to destroy us. They want to elevate us, to bring us into their galactic community as equals. But first, we have to prove that we can be trusted, that we can be rational." The psychological assault continued for hours, featuring dozens of captured humans speaking of Zephyrian benevolence and human foolishness. Each voice was real. Each person, a son or daughter or spouse, reported missing during the first invasion. The aliens had done their homework well, but they had underestimated their audience. In the resistance bunkers beneath Earth's surface, families listened to voices they recognized with tears streaming down their faces. But instead of capitulation, the broadcast sparked something darker and more dangerous: rage. The knowledge that their loved ones were being used as psychological weapons only strengthened their resolve. President Elena Rodriguez, now governing from a mobile command center that moved constantly through Earth's tunnel networks, issued humanity's response. "To those of our people speaking from captivity, know that we hear you and we will come for you. To the aliens using their voices as weapons, know that you have made a grave mistake. You have reminded us not just of what we fight for, but of what you have taken from us." The second invasion began not with an assault on Earth, but with a systematic campaign to break human morale. Zephyrian ships moved to each human colony in turn, broadcasting surrender demands backed by captured human voices. The aliens expected rapid capitulation as colonists chose survival over pointless resistance. Instead, they encountered something that defied all their predictions. On Proxima Colony, Governor Sarah Kim listened to her own daughter's voice pleading for surrender and then ordered the evacuation tunnel sealed. The entire civilian population of 12,000 people retreated to deep shelters while colonial militia prepared to make their last stand. When Zephyrian ground forces landed, they found a ghost town rigged with more explosives than some small moons. On Europa Station, Chief Administrator Robert Torres heard his wife's voice among the psychological broadcasts and responded by converting the station's fusion reactors into the largest bomb in the outer system. The resulting explosion took out an entire Zephyrian battle group and created a radioactive debris field that would deny the system to anyone for decades. On Titan Base, Commander Lisa Park heard her son's voice and made a decision that would become legend throughout human space. Instead of surrender or destruction, she broadcast a message of her own. "To my son Tommy, wherever you are, Mommy loves you and Mommy's coming to get you." To the aliens holding him, "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Park led a desperate mission deep into space, using captured Zephyrian navigation data to locate the fleet's support vessels. Her single ship, packed with volunteers and nuclear weapons, struck at the aliens' mobile shipyard complex. The mission was a tactical suicide run, but it crippled the enemy's ability to repair and refit their ships. Fleet Admiral Zorthak found himself facing the same impossible enemy that had confounded his predecessor. Every psychological weapon the Zephyrians deployed seemed to strengthen human resistance rather than weaken it. Their carefully crafted propaganda broadcasts were met with savage counterattacks that cost his fleet ships and personnel at an unsustainable rate. Dr. Vithera, the Dominion's foremost expert on alien psychology, studied the human responses with growing confusion. Their behavior violates every principle of survival instinct. They are making decisions that guarantee their own destruction in order to inflict minimal damage on our forces. It is as if they value the act of defiance more than their own lives. Can this tendency be exploited? Zorthak asked. I do not believe so, Vithera replied. Any attempt to use their emotional attachments against them appears to trigger a response that increases their combat effectiveness. They seem to draw strength from anger and loss in ways our psychology cannot comprehend. The turning point came during the Battle of the Asteroid Belt. Zephyrian forces had moved to secure the mining installations that provided raw materials for human industry. They expected minimal resistance from the scattered mining crews and automated facilities. Instead, they encountered the Asteroid Resistance Movement, a loose confederation of miners, smugglers, and independent operators who had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Led by Captain Rosa Martinez, a former cargo hauler turned guerrilla commander, they had turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon. The humans had learned to think like asteroids. They moved without patterns, struck without warning, and disappeared into the cosmic debris field before retaliation was possible. Mining charges became kinetic bombardment weapons. Cargo haulers became stealth bombers. Even the smallest prospecting ships became deadly when piloted by people with nothing left to lose. Captain Martinez's flagship was a converted or processor called Lucky Strike. She had modified it extensively, replacing cargo holds with weapon systems and armor plating. But her greatest weapon was information. The miners knew every rock in the belt, every hiding place and trajectory. Welcome to our neighborhood, she broadcast to the Zephyrian fleet as her forces launched their attack. Population, however, many of you we let live. The battle raged for weeks. Zephyrian ships would clear an area of human resistance only to find new attacks coming from previously empty space. The humans used the belt itself as cover, hiding behind asteroids and using gravitational slings to accelerate their weapons to devastating velocities. Most frustrating for the aliens was the humans' complete disregard for tactical orthodoxy. They would retreat from favorable positions to attack from disadvantageous ones. They would abandon perfectly good cover to charge directly at superior forces. They seemed to treat warfare as a form of artistic expression rather than scientific calculation. The breakthrough moment came when Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson, piloting a modified mining drone, discovered something the Zephyrians had tried to keep hidden. Deep in the asteroid belt, protected by the fleet's most powerful ships, was a vessel unlike any they had seen before. It was a prison ship, its holds packed with captured humans from across the solar system. These were the voices that had been broadcasting surrender demands, people taken from their families and used as psychological weapons against their own species. Thompson transmitted the coordinates to Captain Martinez with a simple message: found our people. Going in. What followed was the most concentrated human assault of the war. Every ship in the asteroid resistance movement converged on the prison vessel, striking with such ferocity that the Zephyrian escort ships were overwhelmed in minutes. But the aliens had one last card to play. As human ships closed on the prison vessel, Fleet Admiral Zorthak transmitted a final ultimatum: stand down, or we will execute every human aboard that ship. Your people will die because of your aggression. The transmission was still echoing through space when Captain Martinez's response came back, broadcast on all frequencies. You've had 3 years to kill them. You kept them alive because you thought they made you stronger. You were wrong. They make us stronger. The human assault continued without pause. Ships too damaged to fight rammed Zephyrian vessels. Pilots whose weapons were exhausted used their ships themselves as missiles. In the end, the prison ship was taken at a cost of nearly the entire asteroid resistance movement. But the rescued prisoners brought with them intelligence that would change the course of the war. They've been held not just as psychological weapons, but as subjects for study. The Zephyrians have been trying to understand human psychology by studying their captives, conducting experiments that revealed as much about alien thinking as human. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, now director of xenological research, debriefed the rescued prisoners from her hidden laboratory on Ceres. What she learned sent shockwaves through human command. "They're not just trying to defeat us," she reported to Admiral Stone during an encrypted briefing. "They're trying to understand us. Their entire civilization is built on predictability and order. The fact that we refuse to follow logical patterns terrifies them more than our weapons do." "Terrifies them how?" Stone asked. "They're having something analogous to a cultural breakdown. Their military commanders are questioning orders. Their scientists are proposing theories that contradict fundamental Zephyrian beliefs about intelligence and civilization. We're not just fighting their fleet, we're undermining their entire worldview." This revelation led to a shift in human strategy. If the Zephyrians were studying human psychology to predict behavior, then the logical response was to become even more unpredictable. Admiral Stone authorized the implementation of Operation Chaos Theory, a strategic doctrine that embraced randomness as a tactical advantage. Human fleets began operating with no central coordination whatsoever. Individual ship commanders were given complete autonomy to engage enemy forces however they saw fit. No two attacks followed the same pattern. No tactical doctrine was repeated. The only constant was the absolute refusal to surrender or retreat. The effect on Zephyrian forces was immediate and devastating. Their command structure, built on the principle of perfect information leading to optimal decisions, began to break down under the strain of fighting an enemy that made no logical sense. Ship commanders hesitated to follow orders that had previously worked, uncertain whether human forces would respond predictably. Fleet Admiral Zorthak found himself in command of the most powerful military force in Zephyrian history, yet unable to achieve victory against a technologically inferior enemy. His requests for reinforcements were denied by a Dominion Council that could not understand how 150 warships could fail to conquer a single star system. The final engagement of the second invasion came at Earth itself. Zorthak committed his entire remaining fleet to a direct assault on humanity's homeworld, abandoning all strategic considerations in favor of overwhelming force. If he could not understand human psychology, he would simply obliterate it. The battle for Earth lasted 72 hours and became the most savage engagement in recorded galactic history. Human defenders threw everything they had at the alien fleet. Civilian ships converted to bombers, orbital platforms firing until their power cores melted, ground-based weapons that had never been intended for space combat. But the most devastating human weapon was not technological. It was psychological. Colonel Sarah Chun led a boarding action against Zorthak's flagship, a mission that military doctrine declared impossible. Her Marines used captured Zephyrian technology to breach the alien ship's hull, then fought their way through corridors designed for beings twice their size. The Zephyrians they encountered were not the confident conquerors of 3 years before. They were a species in the midst of an existential crisis. Their fundamental beliefs about the nature of intelligence and civilization shattered by contact with humanity. Many simply surrendered rather than fight. They were broken by months of incomprehensible warfare. Colonel Chun found Fleet Admiral Zorthak on his command bridge, staring at tactical displays that showed his fleet's systematic destruction. The alien commander looked up as the human Marines entered, his crystalline features reflecting something that transcended species boundaries: defeat. "I do not understand," he said in perfect English. "We are superior in every measurable way. Our technology, our numbers, our tactical doctrine. How do you continue to resist?" Chun removed her helmet, looking the alien commander directly in his multifaceted eyes. "Because we don't measure victory the same way you do. You fight to win. We fight because it's who we are." Zorthak's surrender came not as a formal ceremony, but as a simple acknowledgement of mathematical reality. His fleet was destroyed, his forces demoralized, his mission a complete failure. For the second time in their history, the Zephyrian Dominion ordered a retreat from Sol System. But this time the humans followed. The pursuit began 3 days after Fleet Admiral Zorthak's surrender. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Vengeance, a warship built from the fusion of human engineering and captured Zephyrian technology. Around him, The largest fleet in human history prepared to do something no species had ever done. Follow the Zephyrian Dominion home. Sir, reported Navigation Officer Kim, the captured Zephyrian navigation computers have provided us with the hyperspace routes to their core systems. The path to Zeph Prime is open. Stone nodded grimly. The decision to pursue the retreating aliens had not been made lightly. Earth's resources were exhausted, its population devastated by 2 invasions. But the prisoners rescued from the asteroid belt had brought disturbing intelligence about Zephyrian expansion plans. Sol was just a first target. If humanity didn't act now, the next invasion would be even larger. All ships, this is Admiral Stone, he broadcast to the assembled fleet. Today we take the war to them. We've proven that humans can't be conquered. Now we prove that we can't be ignored. The human fleet that entered hyperspace was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 130 ships of wildly different designs and capabilities crewed by volunteers from across human space. Mining vessels converted to bombers flew alongside luxury liners fitted with weapon systems. Even a few Zephyrian ships captured during the recent battles and crewed by human defectors joined the pursuit. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison had argued against the mission from her laboratory on Earth. We're operating with incomplete intelligence about Zephyrian space, she warned during the final strategy session. We don't know what we'll encounter beyond their border systems. Colonel Sarah Chun, now promoted to general and commanding the Expeditionary Marines, had disagreed. We know enough. They're not gods, just aliens with better technology. If we can beat them in our space, we can beat them in theirs. The first indication that the galaxy had changed came when a human fleet reached the threshold system, the outermost border of Zephyrian space. Instead of the expected resistance, they found chaos. The system's defense stations were destroyed, their wreckage drifting in slowly expanding debris clouds. Several Zephyrian warships floated powerless in space, their crews apparently having abandoned them. Most shocking of all, the system's primary communication relay was broadcasting what could only be described as panic. This is threshold command to any Dominion forces. The transmission repeated endlessly. We have lost contact with the inner colonies. Multiple systems report widespread civil unrest. The Hierarchy Council has declared martial law on 17 worlds. Request immediate assistance. Captain Diana Torres, now commanding the captured Zephyrian battleship Defiance, translated the alien communications for Admiral Stone. Sir, it sounds like their entire civilization is falling apart. The term they're using translates roughly to philosophical collapse. I'm not sure what that means in their culture. Stone studied the tactical displays showing the abandoned Zephyrian positions. It means we've broken something more than their military. Morrison was right about one thing. We don't understand what we're dealing with. But we're going to find out. The human fleet moved deeper into Zephyrian space, expecting to encounter massive resistance at every system. Instead, they found a civilization in the midst of an unprecedented crisis. Worlds that had been part of the Dominion for millennia were declaring independence. Zephyrian fleets were refusing orders from the central government. Entire colonies were simply going silent, their populations apparently abandoning centuries of rigid social structure. Dr. Morrison, analyzing intercepted communications from the expedition's mobile laboratory ship, began to understand what was happening. The Zephyrians built their entire society on the principle of logical supremacy, she explained to Admiral Stone during a secure transmission. They believed that their way of thinking was not just superior, but the only valid form of intelligence. Our resistance didn't just defeat their military, it disproved their fundamental philosophy. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Dominion had controlled 73 worlds through the absolute conviction that their rational, ordered approach to existence was the natural state of advanced intelligence. The discovery of humans, beings who fought and won through apparent chaos and irrationality, had shattered that certainty. On Zeph Prime itself, High Arbiter Vexron faced the greatest crisis in Dominion history. The crystal spires that had once hummed with ordered thought now rang with discordant harmonies of doubt and questioning. For the first time in 3 millennia, Zephyrians were asking whether their way of life was truly superior. The humans have introduced a philosophical virus into our civilization, reported Councilmember Kethlon, her crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. Our people are beginning to question fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence, the value of order, the meaning of civilization itself. Young Zephyrians, particularly those who had studied the intercepted human communications, were leading what could only be called a cultural revolution. They spoke of concepts foreign to traditional Dominion thinking: individual expression, artistic creativity, emotional decision-making. Some had even begun to call themselves by individual names rather than their traditional hierarchical designations. The human fleet's approach to the inner systems triggered the final collapse of Zephyrian resistance. Admiral Stone had expected to fight massive battles for every world, but instead found system after system either abandoned or in open rebellion against the Dominion government. On the industrial world of Zeftar, the human fleet was met not with weapons fire, but with a transmission of surrender from the planetary governor. Human vessels, we welcome your arrival. Our world has voted to abandon the Dominion and seek independent status. We request your protection from Dominion loyalist forces. General Chun found herself in the bizarre position of accepting the surrender of entire planets without firing a shot. I've been preparing for the bloodiest campaign in human history, she reported to Earth Command. Instead, we're liberating worlds that are eager to be liberated. But not all Zephyrians had abandoned their traditional beliefs. The core worlds around Zeph Prime rallied to defend their capital system with a fanaticism that seemed oddly familiar to human observers. The Hierarchy Council, faced with the dissolution of their empire, had decided that if their civilization could not survive contact with human irrationality, then neither species deserved to exist. The defense of Zeph Prime was commanded by High Admiral Vorthe, Zorthak's elder broodmate, and the most traditionalist member of the Zephyrian military. He had withdrawn the Dominion's remaining loyal fleets to the capital system, creating a defensive network of unprecedented power. The humans have brought chaos to our ordered galaxy, he declared in his final address to Dominion forces. If we cannot restore harmony through victory, we will restore it through mutual annihilation. Let both species perish rather than see the universe consumed by madness. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zeph Prime system to find an enemy that had learned from their defeats. The Zephyrian defensive positions were not the rigid formations of previous battles, but scattered, irregular placements designed to counter human tactical unpredictability. For the first time in the war, Admiral Stone found himself facing an enemy that was trying to think like humans. The irony was not lost on him. They've spent so much time studying us that they've become more like us, he observed to his staff. The question is, can they out-chaos the masters of chaos? The answer came in the form of the most complex battle of the war. Both sides abandoned conventional tactics entirely, with ships moving in patterns that seemed random to outside observers, but were actually the result of incredibly sophisticated psychological warfare. The Zephyrians were trying to outthink human unpredictability, while the humans were trying to be more unpredictable than an enemy that was now deliberately unpredictable. The battle raged across the entire Zeph Prime system, with engagements occurring simultaneously around all 6 planets and dozens of moons. Human ships found themselves fighting Zephyrian vessels that behaved exactly like human ships, erratically, aggressively, and with apparent disregard for self-preservation. Captain Elena Rodriguez, commanding the converted cargo vessel Indomitable, found herself in a duel with a Zephyrian frigate that was using textbook human tactics against her. "This is surreal," she reported to her crew as alien weapons fire peppered their hull. "They're fighting like us, but they're not us. They're just imitating our surface behaviors without understanding what drives them." The key insight came from an unexpected source. Commander Li Wei, piloting a one-man fighter during the battle for Zeph Prime's 4th moon, noticed something odd about the Zephyrian ship movements. They were random, yes, but they were mathematically random, generated by computer algorithms rather than human intuition. "They're faking chaos," he reported to the fleet command. "They've programmed their ships to behave randomly, but it's artificial randomness. If you know the algorithm, you can predict it." Dr. Morrison, monitoring the battle from her laboratory ship, immediately understood the implications. "They still don't get it," she broadcast to Admiral Stone. "They think unpredictability is a tactic to be copied. They don't understand that for humans, it's an expression of who we are." The breakthrough came when General Chun led a boarding action against High Admiral Vortheke's flagship. Her Marines expected to fight their way through the massive alien vessel, but instead found something unprecedented. Zephyrian crew members who had suffered complete psychological breakdowns. The aliens had tried so hard to think like humans that they had driven themselves to the edge of sanity. Their ordered minds couldn't handle the constant contradiction of behaving irrationally while trying to remain logical. Some had simply shut down, standing motionless at their stations. Others had gone to the opposite extreme, displaying manic behavior that was genuinely chaotic rather than artificially random. General Chun found High Admiral Vorthe K in his command chamber, surrounded by displays showing the systematic destruction of his fleet. The alien commander was no longer the composed, logical being that Zephyrian tradition demanded. His crystalline features were fractured, his movements erratic. "You have destroyed us," he said as the human marines entered. "Not just our ships or our empire, but our very essence. We have tried to become like you, and in doing so, we have lost ourselves." Chun removed her helmet, studying the alien commander with something approaching sympathy. "You are trying to copy our tactics without understanding our motivations. You can't fake being human. You either are or you aren't." Vorthe K's response was to trigger the self-destruct system of his flagship. But even that final act revealed the fundamental difference between the species. Human sacrifice was driven by emotion, by the desire to protect something valued more than life itself. Zephyrian self-destruction was a logical response to an unsolvable problem. The explosion that destroyed the alien flagship also marked the effective end of Zephyrian resistance. The remaining loyal fleet units surrendered or fled, and the Dominion government on Zeph Prime began broadcasting offers of unconditional capitulation. But the victory brought no satisfaction to the human commanders. They had set out to defeat an enemy, and instead had accidentally destroyed an entire civilization's sense of identity. The galaxy was littered with Zephyrian worlds in various stages of cultural collapse, their populations struggling to redefine themselves in a universe where their fundamental assumptions about intelligence and order had been proven wrong. Admiral Stone found himself in the position of governing a conquered empire that had effectively conquered itself. The Zephyrian Dominion no longer existed as a unified entity, but the individual worlds still needed leadership, protection, and guidance towards some form of stable government. "We came here to end a threat to humanity," he reported to President Rodriguez during the first post-victory conference. "Instead, we've become responsible for 73 worlds full of beings who no longer know how to govern themselves." The decision of what to do with the former Dominion would prove to be as challenging as the war itself. Some human leaders argued for complete withdrawal, leaving the Zephyrians to sort out their own cultural crisis. Others pushed for direct occupation, ensuring that the alien worlds could never again threaten human space. But a third option emerged from an unexpected source: the Zephyrian rebels who had allied themselves with humanity during the final campaign. Led by a young alien who had taken the human name Freedom, they proposed a radical solution. "Our people have learned that order without choice is not civilization, but prison," Freedom argued during the first interspecies peace conference. "We ask not for human rule, but for human guidance. Teach us how to be chaotic and still function. Show us how to embrace uncertainty and still build a society." Dr. Morrison, now serving as humanity's chief xenological advisor, supported the proposal despite its obvious risks. "They're not asking us to make them human," she explained to the human delegation. "They're asking us to help them become something new, a synthesis of Zephyrian logic and human adaptability." The solution that emerged would reshape galactic civilization. The former Dominion worlds would be reorganized as the Zephyrian Federation, a loose alliance of independent systems guided by hybrid principles that combined human flexibility with alien technical expertise. Humans would serve as advisors and partners, but not rulers. It was an experiment in cultural evolution on a galactic scale, and its success or failure would determine whether the galaxy could accommodate multiple forms of intelligence, or whether the contact between species inevitably led to the destruction of one or both civilizations. As the human fleet prepared to return as Sol System, Admiral Stone reflected on what they had accomplished. They had set out to defend their homeworld and had ended up rewriting the fundamental principles of galactic civilization. The Zephyrians would never again be the threat they had once posed, but neither would they be the ordered, predictable species they had been for millennia. "We've created something new," he told General Chun as they watched the first joint human-Zephyrian patrol fleet depart from Zeph Prime. Whether it's something better remains to be seen. The war was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. Humanity had proven that they couldn't be conquered by force, but now they had to prove something even more difficult, that they could share the galaxy with beings who had tried to destroy them. The first test of that challenge was already approaching from the depths of space, in the form of distress signals from the edge of the galaxy. Other species, having witnessed the fall of the mighty Zephyrian Dominion, were beginning to take notice of the strange bipedal beings who had rewritten the rules of galactic power. Some of those species were curious, others were afraid, and a few were very, very angry. 6 months after the fall of the Zephyrian Dominion, the first distress signal reached the newly established Human-Zephyrian Joint Command Center on the former capital world of Zeph Prime. The message was broadcast on emergency frequencies in 17 different languages, most of which were unknown to either human or Zephyrian databases. Admiral Sarah Chun, promoted to overall command of the Joint Fleet, studied the translation matrices with growing concern. The message was simple but chilling. The Devourers have returned. All species capable of receiving this transmission, flee or prepare for extinction. The galaxy burns again. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, now director of the Galactic Intelligence Division, had been expecting this moment since the first reports of the Zephyrian collapse reached the Outer Rim worlds. The fall of the Dominion had created a power vacuum that rippled across the galaxy, and nature abhorred vacuums as much in interstellar politics as in physics. The Zephyrians weren't the only major power in this galaxy, she explained to the emergency council session that included both human and Zephyrian representatives. They were just the most aggressive. According to the historical databases we've recovered, there are at least 6 other species or alliances that controlled significant territories. The Dominion's expansion had been pushing against their borders for centuries. Freedom, the young Zephyrian who had become the unofficial leader of the Federation movement, provided additional context. The Devourers are not just a species. They are a philosophy made manifest. They believe that the universe is finite, and therefore all resources, all space, all energy must eventually be consumed by the most worthy civilization. They see existence itself as a zero-sum game. The intelligence reports that followed painted a picture of a galaxy in chaos. The Vorthat Collective had launched massive expansion campaigns into former Dominion territory. The crystalline mines were strip mining entire star systems for resources. The swarm had begun consuming biospheres wholesale, turning living worlds into dead husks to fuel their reproduction. But it was the Devourers that represented the greatest threat. Unlike the other powers, they weren't expanding for resources or territory. They were expanding because they believed it was their cosmic destiny to consume everything that existed. Captain Elena Rodriguez, commanding the Forward Scout Fleet Discovery, transmitted the first confirmed visual contact with Devourer forces from the Antares sector. "Admiral, you need to see this," she reported, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "They're not just destroying worlds. They're unmaking them." The tactical footage showed something that challenged the understanding of both human and Zephyrian science. Devourer ships didn't simply attack planets with conventional weapons. They seemed to be somehow erasing matter itself, leaving behind regions of space where physics worked differently, where the fundamental constants that allowed atoms to exist had been altered. Dr. Morrison studied the sensor data with growing horror. They're not using weapons in any sense we understand. They're manipulating the quantum foundations of reality itself. They're literally eating the universe at the subatomic level. The scale of the threat became clear when the Joint Fleet received a massive data burst from the Kepler Archive, a repository of galactic historical records maintained by a long-dead species called the Watchers. The files contained detailed records of the last time the Devourers had emerged from their home dimension. 65 million years ago, the Devourers had consumed roughly 30% of the galaxy before a coalition of 47 species had managed to drive them back into whatever realm they called home. The cost had been staggering. Entire species had gone extinct just from the effort of resisting them. Worlds had been sacrificed to fuel weapons powerful enough to damage beings that existed partially outside normal space-time. They're not just another alien empire, Admiral Chun reported to Earth Command during an emergency briefing. They're a cosmic force of entropy made sentient. And, according to these records, they're stronger now than they were when they nearly ended galactic civilization the first time. President Rodriguez, now governing an Earth that was still recovering from 2 invasions, faced an impossible decision. Humanity had barely survived contact with the Zephyrians, who were at least comprehensible opponents with recognizable motivations. The Devourers represented something far worse, an enemy that didn't want to conquer or enslave, but simply to unmake existence itself. "Can we run?" she asked during the strategic planning session. "Humanity has shown we can fight impossible odds, but this might be beyond even our capabilities." Admiral Chin's response was immediate and definitive. "Where will we run to? They're consuming the galaxy from the rim inward. There's nowhere to hide. If we're going to survive this, it won't be by running." The decision to fight was made not by any single government or species, but by a collection of desperate survivors from across the galaxy. The Human Zephyrian Federation became the nucleus for what historians would later call the Last Coalition. Every spacefaring species that remained free of devourer influence. The first members were obvious: humans, reformed Zephyrians, and the various species that had been liberated from Dominion rule. But as word of the alliance spread, others began to arrive. The crystalline mines sent representatives. Survivors from consumed Vorthack worlds begged for protection. Even the mysterious ethereals, who had avoided contact with other species for millennia, emerged from their hidden enclaves to join the fight. General Marcus Thompson, formerly Admiral Stone's chief of staff, now found himself coordinating the largest military alliance in galactic history. "We have 300 species offering everything from warships to technical expertise," he reported during the first full coalition meeting. "The problem is getting them to work together. Most of these races have been enemies for centuries." The solution came from an unexpected source: human military doctrine. The chaos tactics that had proven so effective against the Zephyrians were adapted for coalition warfare. Instead of trying to coordinate massive combined operations, each species would fight according to its own strengths and traditions. The result would be strategically unpredictable, tactically diverse, and hopefully overwhelming to an enemy that relied on calculating optimal responses to galactic-scale threats. Dr. Morrison, working with xenobiologists from 17 different species, made a crucial discovery about devourer psychology. "They're not actually sentient in the way we understand it," she reported to the Coalition Council. "They're more like a cosmic immune system, automatically responding to what they perceive as threats to the universe's energy balance. They can't be reasoned with because they're not really thinking, just reacting according to universal scale programming." This revelation led to a radical new strategy. If the Devourers were responding to the galaxy's energy output like an immune system attacking an infection, then the Coalition needed to convince them that the galaxy was already dying. They would fake a galactic-scale energy collapse, making their civilization appear to be naturally declining rather than an expanding threat. The deception required sacrifices that would have been unthinkable before the Devourer threat. Entire star systems were abandoned, their populations evacuated to hidden strongholds, while automated systems created the appearance of civilizational collapse. Worlds were allowed to go dark. Trade networks were severed. The galaxy began to look like it was dying from natural causes rather than external assault. But the plan had a fatal flaw, discovered too late to change course. The Devourers weren't just responding to energy signatures. They were actually feeding on the quantum foundations of space itself. Every civilization that went dark was providing them with exactly the kind of entropic energy they needed to grow stronger. The revelation came when Captain Rodriguez's scout fleet made contact with a group of Devourer entities in the Vega system. The aliens weren't ships in any conventional sense, but rather regions of altered space-time that moved with purpose and consumed everything they touched. "They're not avoiding the dead systems," Rodriguez reported in her final transmission. "They're seeking them out. Every world we've abandoned is making them stronger. We haven't been hiding from them. We've been feeding them." The Coalition's deception strategy collapsed along with Rodriguez's fleet, consumed by entities that turned matter into forms of energy that violated every known law of physics. But her sacrifice provided crucial intelligence. The Devourers could be hurt by conventional weapons, if those weapons were fired by beings who truly didn't fear death. Admiral Chun, studying the sensor data from the Vega engagement, noticed something that everyone else had missed. The Devourer entities had hesitated before consuming Rodriguez's ship, their reality-warping fields fluctuating in what almost looked like confusion. The captain's final transmission had been a defiant curse in Spanish, broadcast on all frequencies as her ship disintegrated around her. They fed on fear and despair, Chun realized. But Rodriguez wasn't afraid. She was angry, and somehow that affected them. Dr. Morrison's analysis confirmed the Admiral's intuition. The Devourers existed partially in a realm where consciousness and reality intersected. They could manipulate matter and energy because they operated from a level of existence where thoughts had physical weight. But that also made them vulnerable to certain types of consciousness, particularly the kind of fierce, irrational determination that humans specialized in. They're used to feeding on species that die in terror. Morrison explained to the coalition leadership. Fear, despair, resignation. Those emotions somehow make it easier for them to unmake matter. But humans don't die in terror. But angry. And, apparently, anger is something their reality manipulation can't easily digest. The discovery led to the development of new tactics that would have been considered insane by any rational military doctrine. Human volunteers began modifying their ships with systems designed not to destroy Devourer entities, but to annoy them. Crews practiced dying with maximum defiance rather than efficiency. Entire fleets were reorganized around the principle of making the enemy's victory as psychologically unsatisfying as possible. The first test of these tactics came during the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where a Devourer swarm had begun consuming the outer planets of humanity's first interstellar colony. Admiral Chun led a fleet of 70 ships against entities that existed in 6 dimensions simultaneously. The human attack was doomed from the start by any conventional measure. Devourer weapons unraveled ships at the quantum level, turning proud warships into expanding clouds of probability rather than debris. But the crews of those ships died exactly as they had trained to, with maximum hostility toward their killers. Captain James Harrison, commanding the cruiser Invincible, broadcast his final words as reality itself began to unravel around his ship. Hey, cosmic horror, you want to eat my ship? Try not to choke on it, you dimensional parasite. The effect was immediate and visible. The Devourer entity that had been consuming the Invincible recoiled, its reality-warping field destabilizing for several seconds. In that moment of vulnerability, conventional weapons from the rest of the fleet actually managed to damage it. The battle became a template for anti-Devourer tactics. Human ships would engage the entities directly, knowing they would be destroyed, but ensuring their destruction was as defiant as possible. While the Devourers struggled to process this form of conscious resistance, ships from other coalition species would attack with conventional weapons. It was a brutal strategy that treated human crews as expendable ammunition, but it worked. For the first time in the war, coalition forces were actually winning engagements against Devourer entities. The tide began to turn when the coalition discovered the Devourer home base, a region of space where reality itself had been consumed, leaving behind a void that existed outside normal physics. Dr. Morrison's analysis suggested that this was where the entities retreated to regenerate between their feeding cycles. If we can damage that void somehow, we might be able to force them back into whatever dimension they came from, she reported to the Coalition Council. But it would require a level of sacrifice that even humans might find difficult to accept. The plan that emerged was designated Operation Final Stand, and it called for the complete sacrifice of the human fleet. 1,000 ships crewed by volunteers would enter the Devourer void and trigger a reality cascade that would theoretically seal the dimensional breach. No one expected any of the volunteers to survive. Admiral Chin volunteered to lead the mission, but was overruled by President Rodriguez herself. "We need you alive to coordinate with our allies," she explained. "This mission requires someone expendable." The role fell to General Thompson, who had been preparing for exactly this kind of impossible mission since the war began. His fleet of volunteers included humans, reformed Zephyrians, and representatives from dozens of other species who had decided that dying with dignity was preferable to living in a universe being consumed by cosmic entropy. The final transmission from Operation Final Stand came not from General Thompson, but from a young human Marine named Sarah Kim, great niece of the Proxima Colony governor who had died during the Zephyrian invasion. "This is Private Kim to anyone listening." Her voice came through dimensional static that shouldn't have allowed communication. "We're inside the void now. It's beautiful in a way, and really pissed off that we're here. Tell my family I kept the promise. Tell them we don't kneel to anyone. not even cosmic horror. The reality cascade that followed was visible from Earth's surface as a new star briefly appeared in the sky, then vanished along with everything else in a sphere of space 10 light-years across. When the distortion cleared, the Devourer void was gone, along with General Thompson's entire fleet. But the sacrifice achieved its goal. Across the galaxy, Devourer entities simply stopped their advance and began retreating toward the rim of known space. Within weeks, they had withdrawn entirely from the main galactic disk, leaving behind scarred systems, but no longer actively consuming new territory. The victory came at cost that left the entire galaxy fundamentally changed. Humanity had lost nearly 40% of its population. Entire species had gone extinct, and vast regions of space had been rendered uninhabitable by reality-warping weapons. But sentient life had survived, and, more importantly, had proven that even cosmic forces could be resisted by beings willing to pay the ultimate price. Admiral Chun, now one of the most senior military officers left alive in human space, found herself responsible for organizing the post-war galaxy. The coalition had held together through desperate necessity, but now its members needed to figure out how to coexist in peacetime. The Zephyrians had adapted to their new philosophical framework better than anyone expected. The species that had once prized logical order above all else had embraced controlled chaos as a survival trait. They were becoming something new, beings that could think like humans when necessary while retaining their technical expertise. But the greatest challenge was yet to come. In the aftermath of the Devourer War, long-range sensors had detected something disturbing at the very edge of the galaxy. Artificial structures on a scale that dwarfed anything built by any known civilization. Someone or something had been watching the war, and now they were beginning to move. The galaxy is quieter now, Admiral Chun reported to Earth Command in her final strategic assessment. The Devourers are gone. The major powers are either destroyed or allied with us, and most of the dangerous species have been forced to cooperate just to survive. But quiet doesn't mean safe. The structures at the galaxy's edge were growing larger, and preliminary analysis suggested they were being built by beings that made the Devourers look like a minor inconvenience. Humanity had proven they could survive contact with cosmic horror, but the next test would determine whether they could survive contact with cosmic intelligence. The war was over, but the universe was just beginning to take notice of the strange species that refused to accept defeat, even from forces that operated outside the normal rules of reality. And some of those beings watching from the cosmic distances were starting to wonder whether humanity represented evolution's next step or its greatest mistake. The beings that emerged from the structures at the galaxy's edge defied every category that sentient life had created to understand itself. They called themselves the Architects, and they had been watching galactic civilization develop for over 1 billion years, occasionally intervening to guide evolution in directions they found aesthetically pleasing. Admiral Sarah Chun received the first communication from the Architects while standing on the observation deck of the Joint Command Station orbiting New Zeph Prime. The message didn't arrive through normal channels. It simply appeared in her mind, speaking in a voice that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of space itself. Greetings, Admiral Chun of the Human Zephyrian Coalition. We are the architects of reality, shapers of cosmic evolution, gardeners of consciousness. We have observed your species' recent disruptions to the galactic order with considerable interest. The message was accompanied by images that bypassed her optical nerves entirely, showing her vistas of space and time that her human brain struggled to process. Galaxies being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling like waves on an ocean, reality itself being sculpted like clay by beings whose existence spanned geological eras. We congratulate you on your success against the entropy feeders, the voice continued, using the Architect's term for the Devourers. Few species survive their first encounter with cosmic-level threats. Even fewer emerge stronger. You have proven interesting. Admiral Chun managed to find her voice despite the overwhelming nature of the contact. What do you want from us? The response came with what might have been amusement, if beings that old were capable of such emotions. Want? Child of Earth, we have shaped the birth of stars and guided the evolution of dimensions. We do not want in the manner your species understands. We observe, we evaluate, we cultivate, and occasionally we prune. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, monitoring the communication from the station's science deck, immediately understood the implication. Her analysis had suggested that the structures at the galaxy's edge were not military installations, but something far more disturbing. Research stations designed to study galactic civilization like bacteria in a petri dish. The architect's next communication confirmed her worst fears. Your species has introduced unprecedented chaos into our galactic experiment. The variables you represent were not part of our carefully balanced equations. You have contaminated millions of years of controlled development with your uniqueness. Images flooded Chen's mind. The systematic cultivation of galactic civilization according to some cosmic plan, with species being guided along predetermined evolutionary paths. The Zephyrian Dominion had been one of their success stories, a civilization that had achieved the perfect balance of order and expansion. Humanity's interference had ruined millennia of careful work. We face an unprecedented decision. The architect continued. Do we terminate this experiment and begin again, or do we attempt to incorporate your chaos into our design? The debate among our collective has been vigorous. President Elena Rodriguez, contacted immediately through quantum entanglement communicators, authorized Admiral Chun to respond on behalf of all humanity. The message she transmitted was characteristically direct. We didn't ask to be part of your experiment. If you want to include us in your plans, we're open to discussion. If you want to eliminate us, you'll find we're not easily deleted. The architect's response carried overtones that might have been surprise. You speak to beings who have existed since before your sun was formed with the tone of an equal. This, too, is unprecedented. Your species lacks the power to threaten us, yet you do not show appropriate deference. Fascinating. What followed was the strangest diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. The architects operated on timescales that made human civilization a brief flicker, yet they found themselves genuinely puzzled by humanity's refusal to acknowledge their cosmic superiority. Other species, when contacted by the architects, either worshipped them as gods or accepted their role as experimental subjects. Humans did neither. Freedom, the Zephyrian leader who had become humanity's closest alien ally, provided crucial insight during the emergency council session. The architects think in terms of cosmic principles and universal laws, he explained. They cannot comprehend a species that operates according to individual will rather than mathematical necessity. To them, free will is literally incomprehensible. The deadlock was broken by an unexpected intervention. Captain Elena Rodriguez, commanding a routine patrol near the galactic rim, encountered an architect observation station and made first physical contact with one of the cosmic beings. Her transmission back to command was brief. Admiral, you need to get out here right away. I found something that changes everything. The observation station was a structure that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, most of which human senses couldn't perceive. But at its center was something that shocked Admiral Chun more than all the cosmic horror she had previously encountered, a human being. The figure was recognizably human, but wrong in ways that went beyond physical description. He moved as if time was optional, spoke in languages that predated human civilization, and his eyes held knowledge that no mortal mind should possess. But his smile was purely human. "Hello, Sarah," he said, using her first name with casual familiarity. "I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, late of the University of Chicago's Theoretical Physics Department. I died about 6,000 years ago. Give or take a century." Admiral Chun stared at the impossible figure. "That's not possible. Humans have only been spacefaring for a few decades." Harrison's laugh was disturbingly normal given the circumstances. Time isn't linear when you're working with beings who exist outside normal causality. I volunteered for the architect program during the 23rd century, after humanity had spread across most of the galaxy. From your perspective, that future hasn't happened yet. From mine, it's ancient history. The revelation that humanity had a representative among the architects reframed the entire situation. Harrison explained that the cosmic beings had been monitoring human development for millennia, but had never directly interfered because they couldn't predict how humanity would respond to such contact. They've been trying to figure out how to include humans in their galactic design without destroying the experiment, Harrison continued. The problem is that human behavior violates their understanding of how consciousness works. You make decisions based on emotion, intuition, and pure stubbornness rather than logical analysis. To beings who have been cultivating rational civilizations for billions of years, humans are like a computer virus in their program. Admiral Chun absorbed this information with growing understanding. So they're not threatening us because we're dangerous. They're threatening us because we're unpredictable. Exactly. And after your performance against the Zephyrians and the Devourers, they're starting to wonder if unpredictability might be a feature rather than a bug. But they need proof that human chaos can be constructive rather than purely destructive. The test that the architects proposed was unlike anything humanity had faced before. They would be given stewardship of an entire galactic sector, complete with dozens of developing civilizations in various stages of advancement. Humanity's task would be to guide these species toward galactic citizenship without imposing human values or destroying existing cultures. It's the ultimate expression of your species' capabilities, Harrison explained. The architects want to see if humans can nurture other forms of intelligence without trying to make them human. If you succeed, humanity will be accepted as a galactic guardian species. If you fail, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The architects had erased failed experiments before, entire civilizations deleted from existence as if they had never been. The fate of not just humanity, but every species allied with them, hung in the balance. Dr. Morrison assembled a team of xenobiologists, philosophers, and cultural specialists from across coalition space to prepare for the challenge. The civilizations they would be responsible for range from Stone Age hunter-gatherers to early space explorers, each with unique biologies and social structures that defied easy categorization. We can't approach this like a military operation, she warned the assembled team. These aren't enemies to be defeated or allies to be recruited. They're children in cosmic terms.